Okay, well, it's a new year, and we're in a new series that actually starts a new chapter.
That's right. We made it to Matthew chapter 6.
All right, so as we journey through the Sermon on the Mount, this next section of teaching from Jesus deals with kind of our acts of righteousness, the things that we practice in our faith, and how we need to be careful about who we're doing it for or what we're doing it for. And so today's topic really is kind of introductory as we look at an audience of one, and this idea that who the audience that we have in mind really helps determine the rewards that we're going to get out of our practice of faith.
Right. And so Jesus kind of introduces this segment of his teaching in the Sermon on the Mount with this caution toward followers, to say, hey, be careful. If you display your acts of righteousness before other people, then there's no reward for you from your Father in heaven. Mm-hmm. Now, we're going to be careful as we walk through the application of this series in reminding ourselves that there's many examples from Jesus himself where he's praying publicly, praying in front of other people, where there was knowledge that they were fasting together in community, acts of generosity, So there are places where there is a public awareness of acts of righteousness. But I think Jesus is once again getting to a heart issue like we've seen over and over again. And if the motive behind our acts of righteousness is really just to gain the approval of other people, there's kind of this sense throughout the text over and over again that says, well, if that's the reward you're looking for, then that's the one you'll get. Like, that'll be the reward. It'll be the noticing of other people and whatever accolades you may get from other people, but don't expect an additional reward from your Father.
Yeah, and this really is kind of touches on a broader theme that in all of Jesus' teaching about his kingdom and life in his kingdom, and kind of this desire from him for us to show humility, right, in our interactions with others and our interactions with God. And so we find parables like the one that we read just in your group today that's about this wedding feast and all these, you have this picture. I guess we're trying to imagine what their wedding feast would have looked like, because we don't have seating charts usually at our parties anymore, but apparently they did. And there's the seat of honor, and then the seats closest to the seat of honor, and then right on down to the seats that were least honorable. And so there's obviously some jockeying and political movement, in any kind of given party in that day of trying to figure out okay, well, where do I stand amongst people, and a desire to be further up the table, further up the rank. And so Jesus shares this as a parable, it says, not just as a piece of wisdom, but as something that has to do with the kingdom. And he says, okay, when you're at a feast, sit at a lowly spot and let them elevate you versus you elevating yourself and then getting demoted. And at surface level, that sounds like just a piece of wisdom that is like a good thing to keep in mind, but I think it actually runs deeper than that. So it's wisdom. It made me think of this story of a time when I was serving on a committee, and I was on this group and we had to self-select a leader. And I'm sitting here looking at these people who, like former CEO of Compassion International, this other person that was a national leader, and all these different, and I'm like, okay, who wants to lead, And then somehow they ended up picking me, and I'm like, hang on a second, you guys are way more qualified. But I have a feeling also, if I would have spoken up and said hey, I'll lead this, those guys probably would have been like, no, you're not.
Right.
So it's just, there is wisdom that we understand that level of it. But what do you think Jesus is saying from a kingdom principle?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think we're coming to this heart that he's wanting to cultivate in us. And there is a beauty in a humility that takes on the very character of Christ himself, who was willing to take on the nature of a servant, is what we learn of Jesus. And so when we foster that spirit, that attitude within us, and are humbled, that could result in other people honoring our humility, right? But then it's not us jockeying or trying to earn the approval of other people. It's us resting in the approval of our audience of one. And in that we can be humble, we can be lowly, we don't have to force our way. we can rest and let Him do all of that for us.
Yeah, that's good. So there's actually like a spiritual discipline called secrecy that people have practiced for a long time of, maybe not doing everything like we talked about before, not that everything has to be secret, but that some things should probably be secret if we want to continue to check our heart and our motive, why we're doing things. And it is harder to, if you do it in secret, then you can't expect any applause.
Right.
You can't.
It kind of comes to, how, if we were to say, well, how do you cultivate that heart, right? How do you foster humility?
Yeah.
Well, so this would be a practice or a discipline of secrecy that helps cultivate that character of Christ in us. And I think that it is a powerful practice of having that element of our lives with the awareness that then things that are visible are an outflow actually of something that we're doing, whether people see it or not.
That's good. Yeah, you don't want to show up and pray publicly and that's the only time you ever pray is when it's public. You hopefully have a relationship that you're speaking out of. And I think we all have a sense of when we're listening to someone leading prayer that clearly has a relationship.
So kind of bringing this full circle, then what we're saying kind of in this group time is choosing to cultivate secrecy, or what we might call the hidden life, in our spiritual practices, is in a way, it is a way of choosing to take the less honorable seat at the table, right? To choose humility. And you may get elevated and move to a seat of honor, but this is a way of choosing and to cultivate that humble heart that He desires in us. So as you're talking through these things about getting practical with your faith today, there's some great discussion prompts in that area in particular. So just take some time and talk through the content.